We are fortunate to be joined by both Kimberly O'Donnell, our Chief Fundraising Officer, and Christy Rink, a fundraising coach here at Bonterra, to walk us through today's content. I got a sneak peek, of course, and it looks great. We are in for a treat with a lot of valuable information that we can take into this upcoming year end, which is going to come faster than we know it. I swear. It's already here, basically.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. So I want to go ahead, and I believe I'm passing it to you, Kimberly.
You are. Hi, everybody. It is great to see these names and organizations in the chat from all over, truly. We've got folks in Canada, the US, and some really great organizations represented here. I know that your time is valuable, and so I just want to thank you for taking this time with us right now to step into thinking about your year-end fundraising campaigns and what you can be doing throughout the campaign to make sure that you are maximizing every effort that you take to raise the most amount of money and really bring so much more awareness to your mission. So thank you. And as we get started, please, take a nice deep breath. I like to start some of my webinars that way with just like cleansing breath and just resetting. Right now, there's nowhere else that you need to be. There is nothing else that you need to be doing. You have chosen to go on this hour-long journey with us. And so let's do it, and let's do it in presence and together. And we're going to look forward to any of your questions that come up. Please chat them. Actually, please put them in the, do we have a Q&A? Yes. Please put them in the Q&A, and we'll get to them as we go. So let's talk a minute about why year-end matters. It's so important because year-end fundraising campaigns are a critical component of any nonprofit's funding strategy, and it captures the greatest number of donations in mass among the industry. And so nearly 30% of annual giving is going to happen in December. 10% of that happens during the last 3 days of the year. So you can't give up during those last 3 days because that is when people are really motivated to wrap up their year strongly and they're giving strongly. And then combined with that momentum of Giving Tuesday, this period represents the largest giving spike of the year, and it's the perfect opportunity for you to engage donors, inspire generosity, celebrate volunteers, and meet your year-end goals with a true, celebration, right? Like confetti. I'm thinking of that confetti emoji. So today's goals are really to we're going to cover 4 things. One, we're going to talk about what to track beyond dollars raised, how to assess your communications channels, how to make smart pivots when things are not going your way, and how to eliminate those operational roadblocks that can sometimes cost you revenue. I'm going to turn things over now to Christy to talk about the metrics that truly matter.
Well, I just want to thank you again for showing up today. I know that your time is really valuable, and we really appreciate you offering this hour to us. But we're going to go ahead and just dig kind of right in and get going. So let's talk about, metrics that matter. Tracking revenue alone doesn't really reveal the underlying trends because it's a lagging indicator. And that means that it's measured after the outcome has already occurred. And at that point, it's too late. So we're going to talk about key performance indicators, or KPIs, like donor retention, your gift size, donor type breakdowns, and conversion rates, which are leading indicators. So they're going to tell you why your revenue behaves the way that it does and how to act and where to act early on so that you can make those changes that are going to make the impacts. So let's first talk about retention. So the retention metrics will reveal the fragility of your donor loyalty, and they highlight where you're losing support and why proactive stewardship really matters. Only 23% of new donors return in subsequent years. However, returning donors show a much better retention rate of 61%, which makes them a critical audience to cultivate. Comparing new donors versus your returning donors helps assess both your acquisition success and your retention effectiveness. So those are all the keys to understanding your campaign health. Another thing is to monitor your gift size, both your one-time donors and your recurring donors. And that gives you insight into your donor engagement and how you're going to be able to sustain your long-term growth. So question would be, is the average gift increasing or decreasing compared to the previous year? And then lastly, conversion rates. They show if your messaging and your user experience is effective. So they pinpoint how well your email, your social, and your donation pages are compelling supporters to give. So when you're implementing regular monitoring of these metrics, it's going to help you to do three things. One, it's going to help you to identify issues with your donor engagement and your messaging. Two, it's going to optimize your campaigns based on what's actually working. And then three, it's going to shift you from a reactive to a strategic, proactive fundraising, which is going to help all of us, especially through this giving season when we all seem to be stressed out and moving really quickly. If we can just get in front of some of the challenges that we know are going to pop up, then let's do it now. And that way we can make this a much more relaxing and less stressful period of time. So let's kind of talk about a quick example. So I was working with one nonprofit recently where halfway through their year-end campaign, we noticed that their average gift size was dropping by 15% compared to the prior year, even though their donor response was pretty steady. So what we were able to do is act quickly, and we launched a $50,000 matching gift challenge with major donor support. So that was promoted heavily across email and social channels. I think we probably all know that matches are proven to boost average gifts, but they boost it by up to 51%. So within a week, their average gift size rebounded and it finished 20% higher than the trend line. So this is a case that shows how when you're tracking those leading indicators like gift size, how it will allow you to pivot in real time and avoid those missed revenue goals. So let's kind of break each of those down one by one. So starting with donor retention, it's one of the clearest signs of whether your stewardship is working, your donor cultivation is working. So if first-time donors don't come back, and only about 20 to 25% of them do, but if that number isn't coming back, your acquisition investment is wasted. So tracking multi-year retention and lapsed donor reactivation helps you see where your loyalty is strong and where donors are slipping away. So donor retention metrics can highlight the leak points in your journey, like a weak thank you follow-up or limited engagement. So you can adjust before those supporters kind of drift off. And I'll be honest with you, this is an area where I've seen the least amount of effort put into over the last few years. And it's become apparent while we're going through this period of nonprofits are losing a lot of supporters. And one of the things that I've looked back and I can see, through those COVID years, it wasn't very difficult to bring in new donors or very difficult to bring in those donations, but it's increasingly become so. And a lot of organizations I found have kind of fallen back and put that donor engagement, that donor cultivation on the back burner. And now we're kind of seeing how that was a strategy that's impacted us where we are today. So it's really important to kind of walk through your donor engagement strategies now and figure out how we can get in front of making the most of those. So moving on from that, let's talk about gift size. So as we talked about in the previous example, keeping an eye on your average gift tells you a lot about how engaged your donors feel. So compare this year's average gift to last year's, and then track the value and the retention of recurring donors to spot those trends. So you can also do this by looking at a mix of like the small donors, then your mid-level donors, and then your major gifts donors as too, to make sure that you can understand where your support is strongest. So if your gifts are shrinking, you can tweak your messaging to highlight the impact at higher levels, and we're going to give you some examples of that later. And if your recurring giving is growing, then lean into those sustaining donor programs. So the next metric we're going to discuss is looking at those new versus those returning donors. because that's going to help you understand if you're bringing in new donors at a rate that makes the most sense. So we know that acquisitions can be pretty costly, and retaining them, though, is what drives up your higher return on investment or your ROI. So it's important to track how many of your first-time donors give again in year two, meaning they turn into a multi-donor. The average of that is only about 23%, but the percentage that will stick with you, those second gift people, those third gift people, is closer to 61%. So again, those donor cultivation tactics are what's going to help drive that number up. And then you'll be able to compare their lifetime value, and that will help you see how much more valuable those loyal donors are. And that will help you be able to campaign for some additional acquisition investment. So if you use this data to refine your acquisition strategies and double down on your stewardship, then for your returning supporters, you'll be able to go a long way with them because they truly are the backbone of your fundraising. So last but not least, the last metric we'll talk about are the conversion rates. So this is going to show whether your outreach is actually moving people to give. So it's important to track the whole journey. So email opens with a little bit of a grain of salt because we know what's happening there. But email opens through to the clicks through to donations. So tracking that, looking at your social reach to your gifts, looking at your visits to your donation page during campaign efforts that end in a completed gift. So if conversions are low, it's a signal to simplify or optimize your giving page, sharpen your calls to action, or test new messaging. And we're going to give you some examples of that later on as well. But monitoring campaign-specific conversion rates helps you see what truly resonates and drives that action.
Okay, great points, Christy, and an awesome review of the metrics. Let's move on to talking about how to monitor your metrics in an ongoing fashion. Because checking your fundraising metrics regularly is going to keep you from reacting too late. You'll have the insight that you need to make decisions and pivot more quickly. A simple monthly dashboard will track retention, average gift size, your donor mix, and the conversion rates. And looking at those conversion rates gives you a clear picture of what's working and what isn't. And so when you see a dip, then you can test and adjust in real time, whether that means shifting to different messaging or launching a reactivation series with lapsed donors. There are things that you can do in the moment that can really help make a difference. The key is to use these insights to shape your campaigns in a proactive in a proactive fashion, not just report on them after the fact. So your year-end campaign, and I know you know this, but I'm going to remind you all, is that it is not a set it and forget it exercise. It is something that you want to keep focused on and be tracking regularly. And so now that we've decided on the metrics and projections that we want to track, let's move into setting realistic expectations. Once your metrics and goals are in place, the next step is those realistic expectations, and that means deciding in advance who gets notified. I don't know why I can't speak today, y'all. Who gets notified when results start to slip, and then how quickly you can act. It also means being proactive with your leadership team, showing them the data story as it's happening so their expectations don't spiral too high. The goal for you would be to stay transparent, aligned, and nimble. And so when you're reporting on a regular basis up to your leadership team and to others in your organization, everyone gets acclimated to the data, and then that allows them to absorb it better, and it allows them to stay rooted in reality as you go. So you're training your leadership team on what to be, and others on what to look for during the campaign, and where there might be points that are coming up where you might need to readjust. All right, so as we wrap up this bit on metrics and tracking, the key point is that revenue is important, but by the time you see it dip, it is already too late to fix. And that's why your leading key performance indicators, your KPIs like donor retention, average gift size, and your conversion rates are so critical for you to monitor in real time. And a good question. So we added to, we have a couple summary slides throughout this presentation, and we added this little section to each of them that says consultants or agencies should be asked, because we know that some of you may be working with digital agencies or direct mail agencies, as well as consultants who are helping you with your campaign. And so these are the types of questions that we would encourage you to ask them. Are we tracking these results weekly? And what stories and trends are we seeing from the data? You will want to ask things like, how does our donor retention compare to last year? Is the average gift size up or down? Are we bringing in new donors or just leaning into reactivations? So these questions will enable you to be much more proactive rather than reactive. So now I'm going to turn things over to Christy, who's going to talk with us about evaluating channel performance.
Yeah. So when you're running a year-end campaign, it's not enough just to push messages out across channels. You need to know which ones are actually working. So email performance can be tracked through open rates, click-throughs, and how well segments convert on your donation page. Social media is great for reach and engagement, but you have to be careful not to confuse likes and shares with real giving. Direct mail still plays a big role, especially when it's timed well and paired with digital follow-ups. One tool that I use pretty frequently, it's a simple heat map exercise, which you can see which channels are really pulling their weight. For example, if your email click-through rate dips below a certain point, it's a signal to adjust your messaging mid-campaign. So this is kind of the gist of it. You can go to the next, there you go. And I'll explain it, how to actually put it together on the next slide. But this really helps you see which channels are meeting expectations or not. And it also helps you decide like where to invest more energy, which we all know our energy during end of year like needs to really be focused on the things that are going to perform the best. And then it also helps you understand where and how you're going to troubleshoot the areas that are underperforming. So the goal here is to kind of double down on what's working and reallocate any money and effort towards those high performers. I also think that this is a really helpful exercise for after the year-end campaign because it helps you to compare the effectiveness of each channel kind of side by side and determine which produce the best return on your investment. For example, a heat map could reveal that email appeals generated a higher response rate with lower costs compared to social media ads. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to ever do social media ads. It just means that, because we know that it's important to cast that wide net, but it does mean that we need to adjust and improve either our tactics, our strategy, our messaging, or even our execution, or maybe all of the above. So the next slide, this will show you kind of how to put it together. So this gives us a quick snapshot, like I said. And so what you're going to do is for each channel that you are fundraising in, you're going to look at your data and determine what are your thresholds. So what would be your underperformance threshold, which I code as red, or what would be the threshold of results that are kind of a caution you want to pay attention to, and yet I label that as yellow. And then the ones that stay on track, I keep those as green. So you can easily spot like where you're succeeding and where attention is needed. And these thresholds are based on your results and what you typically see. So it would shift for each organization, it would be different. So for example, if your email click-through rates start to dip into the red zone, that signals that you have a messaging issue, and that can be fixed mid-campaign. If the average gift size is trending yellow, we might introduce what we just talked about, a matching gift challenge to encourage larger donations. But the power of this tool is that it helps us troubleshoot in real time, which is really important. And rather than waiting until the end of the campaign when it's too late to kind of course correct. So as you can see, the green is stay the course, yellow is monitor closely and consider tweaks, and then red is pivot immediately. So the main points that you're looking for when you're planning this out is you've got three questions or three things that you want to make sure that you understand for each week. So what is the biggest risk metric for the week that you're reviewing this? What is the pivot action that's planned? Because we're going to share some examples in just a minute for different pivots that you can implement when you see results start to dip. But go ahead and plan out what is the action going to be, and then who's going to own it? Who's going to take that baton and get it across the finish line so that we can react quickly? So, in summary, every channel tells us a story, but leadership needs more than vanity metrics like followers and page views to see that whole picture. And that's where the deeper reporting comes in. If you work with an agency, as Kimberly mentioned, ask them which channels are underperforming and what are the thresholds that are going to trigger action. A simple heat map like this with the green, the yellow, and the red indicators for each channel that you're working in will give that instant clarity. But do they have a tool or something that they're working with that's going to, like Kimberly mentioned, this isn't a set it and forget it. So we want to stay on top of it to make sure that we can make those changes. But it really does help leaders kind of quickly spot where those resources should shift. And it ensures that those decisions are based on real performance and not just the surface numbers. I'll turn it over to you,
Okay.
Kimberly.
Yes. So what should we do, right, when the early results aren't going our way? It's time to start testing and pivoting. And so let's think about it this way. You've set up your metrics, you've set up your expectations, and now the work is beginning on the actual campaigns that you're creating. And while you are discussing tactics and strategy, it's critical that you're thinking about using A/B testing through all facets of your campaign. A/B testing is the foundation of smart fundraising because it takes the guesswork out of your decision making. Instead of assuming what is going to resonate for your stakeholders, right, for your audience, you can test two versions side by side. And this could be testing subject lines, right? Like you could have hey, there's 3 days left to give subject line versus an impact driven one, right? Your gift feeds a family this holiday. For your donation pages, you might compare a simple one-click form against a longer form that might suggest gift amounts to see which one is driving more completions. And this matters because donor behavior changes quickly. And what worked last year or what worked last month might not land today in our world that we are living in. So with A/B testing, you're really getting real-time insights that are going to help you pivot mid-campaign with confidence, building on your proven results rather than hunches. And I'm going to share an example of that. So I was a chief philanthropy officer for an organization, and our CEO has told me, I don't want these long direct mail letters, that have the story in it and the whole thing. Nobody wants to read that anymore. These are professionals. I was working for a medical association, so it was the members, right? And he said, these folks don't have time to read that. They just need a memo with the key points on why it's important for them to give, and then give them the opportunity to give. And I said, well, with all due respect, there's a lot of data behind the longer form fundraising appeal letters. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to ABC test this with you to see which one performs best. And he agreed. And so we went down the journey of a memo-like appeal letter. We had a B test, which was a appeal letter that was a story. It had a beautiful story in it. And then we had the C option, which had the story and a buck slip, which is an insert that had some stats and some pictures on it, right? Like, so we had the story really going in personal, and then we had sort of the buck slip that showcased the organizational impact that was being made. Guess which one performed best, my fundraising friends? Christy, do you want to guess? Others can
The
feel
long
free
one.
to chat in
The
here. I want to
story,
know.
the story.
The story with the pictures, right? Like the story C, the story with the buck slip. And so it's important to test and learn. We did that all the time with different stories, right? You're testing and you're gaining information. And I can't say enough what you did last year or last campaign was a different point in time. So continue to A/B test. But you all know it's the story that really can make that impact and convert supporters into donors. All right, so let's talk about pivoting mid-campaign. This is all about agility, right? Making small, timely adjustments that are going to turn an underperforming campaign into a strong finish is what it's about. And so if your messaging isn't landing, then test new subject lines, refresh your stories, or add additional urgency. If one channel is outperforming, put more weight behind it and pull back on what isn't working. Think about the levers that you have to work with. You've got all kinds of levers at your disposal. Begin to use those. And so add in incentives like matching gifts, countdowns, simple make it monthly options can really spark some new momentum and help you act and recover quickly. Now, one thing, if your email open rates start to tank, for example, you can test a new subject line and see results within 48 hours. So you can pivot, pivot, pivot. I'm hearkening back to that Friends episode with Ross as they're moving that couch up, where he's like, pivot, pivot, pivot. That's what we got to do. All right. And then moving on to just some more advice around low open rates. If they're not opening, then the problem usually starts with your subject line. It just isn't resonating. So begin to test variations that add urgency or feel more personalized or are going to highlight impact. And then begin to see what resonates. And don't forget a quick win. Just resend the message to the non-openers within 48 hours because they might have missed it the first time. I know I miss a ton of things that come through my box the first time. And then also talk about if people are opening your emails, but they are not clicking that beautiful red heart button here, then it may be that the call to action just isn't clear enough. So stick to one simple ask in your appeals, right? Make them easy to spot. Buttons usually work really better than buried links. And you can also give the content a refresh with stronger visuals. Or a new story angle that'll help inspire action. Also think about your authors in these stories, your characters in these stories. Think about it like Netflix, right? You have your favorite shows that you watch, and there are characters that are beloved to you, but as you're watching that show, your favorite show, there's lots of people that you are seeing. Your organization has lots of characters, stakeholders that you can really highlight throughout your campaign. And if things aren't working, move from your executive director to a service recipient who's given you permission, or a volunteer, or the program manager. Tell these stories through the lens of many people who are involved in your organization. All right, and so now average gift size.
We said we would circle back to this. So when gifts are coming in, but the amounts feel smaller than expected, which we all hate that, don't we? A few tweaks can be made that we're going to make a big difference. So we've talked about the matching gift challenge. We know that that inspires donors to give more, but we can also add suggested amounts, clear impact labels. I also call them symbolic asks, like $75 will provide school supplies for 10 students. And that shows the value of giving bigger. You can also use what we call as a roundup upsell. And it's where you've got an ask with a checkbox where you are asking them to just round up another few dollars to cover like program supplies or to add in, food for 2 more families or whatever the case may be, just a little bit more to see if we can extend that giving amount. So when we're talking about pivoting with low donor retention, if your donors aren't sticking around, it usually means they're not feeling connected to that impact of their gift. So a heartfelt mid-campaign update can remind them why their support matters right now. And you can pair that with personalized thank yous, like a quick video from your CEO or a story that shows real results. And you're going to deepen that relationship and keep donors engaged for the long haul. For example, I was working with an organization where before they didn't have any communication in between their appeals. It was just asking for money every single time they sent something to their donor base. And so we changed that by including kind of mid-campaign emails where we've, said things like, you've already helped 30 families put food on the table this week. Thank you so much. And that's really just a short and sweet update. It's not a long email that they have to read. They don't have to click on anything if they don't want to. You can include videos in that, but really just something to demonstrate that impact and make them feel good about their giving. And for the personalized thank yous, the CEOs being able to do videos. Like we worked with another organization where anytime someone gave a gift online, it was just that system email receipt. It was just very generic, thank you, here's your receipt. And so we changed that up by putting in personalized videos from the CEO, depending on the dollar amount. Obviously, your major donors probably are going to get that more personalized touch or even a hand signed letter. I mean, you can print those letters and have the CEO sign them and maybe put a little note in the margin. That goes a long way. And then board calls. Donors love getting calls, thank you calls from the board, and just being able to have a conversation. It makes them feel more insider. Um, and it can make a really big difference. So the planning there is just to, see if you can get some buy-in from the board, get a few volunteers, give them a script and some impact statements that they can have conversation with, and just ask them to make a few phone calls. That goes a long way. So
And if I could jump in,
oh, go
Christy,
ahead.
while you're mentioning that, those thank you calls to some of your major donors or those that are high potential donors, would be great. Like if you made those calls, if your board made those calls about 2 weeks before Thanksgiving or Giving Tuesday, it's a
Mhm.
great time because it will get their mindset on, oh yeah, that organization, I really like that was a really nice touch. And then all of a sudden Thanksgiving and Giving Tuesday come around and your appeal letter, right? And it all fits in together beautifully.
Yeah, it makes them feel special. So if lots of people are landing on your donation page but don't finish giving, the page is most likely the barrier. So keeping the form short and simple is critical. So if only ask for what you really need and make sure that the design works seamlessly on mobile. Adding a touch of urgency like give before a certain date and your gift will be matched can also help donors follow through in the moment. For example, we worked with an organization where they had a very long donation form. It had like 10 to 12 required fields. And so after we optimized that, we just included 3 to 4 of the essential fields. And then we had a drop down where they could input their address if they were so inclined. And that helped dramatically. We also redesigned it to make sure that it was responsive. Because before it was more of a desktop form, and when you looked at it on your phone, I mean, you couldn't really tell what was going on and how to make a GIF. The fields were overlapping and the images were skewed. So we were able to redesign that, make it more responsive with large buttons. We had autofill for credit cards, Venmo, PayPal, Apple Pay, which is actually really critical as well because nobody really wants to pull out their credit card and out of their wallet or their purse. If they can just input that information from their phone, it speeds up the time and creates more conversions. And then lastly, adding in that urgent copy, kind of taking out that generic, please support our mission and giving, something a little more, consistent with the campaign that you're running at the time. So just as kind of a bonus, I know that we're always like, when do we do things? How long do we wait? When do we kind of pull that trigger and decide we need to go in a different direction? A simple way to decide where to put your energy is to watch the channel performance week by week. And a lot of you are probably doing it day by day. And if a channel is underperforming for 2 weeks in a row, it's a sign to scale back and readjust. But if it's consistently strong for 2 weeks, that's your green light to double down and maximize that momentum. And for campaigns like Giving Tuesday, obviously you don't have a 2 week time frame to be able to do that. So it doesn't, you've got to, make those pivots kind of on a hour by hour rotation. But in general, this is something that you can use that will really help you make that decision to just, either cut it or keep going.
Great advice. And so let's say that we are now moving through the campaign. It's been launched, you're testing, you're learning, you're going. I would encourage you to not forget to celebrate the wins during the campaign. Really important to be able to build momentum, keep everybody on your team, in your organization aware and motivated, right? Internally, share those quick KPIs, those turnaround stories that you have in staff meetings, and also, empower your leadership if they're going to be reporting to the board. Those are great ways to help your organization see that big picture and see how agile you and your team are as you are making the most of this fundraising period. Externally, you can thank donors publicly with your social posts, provide milestone updates, do a fun, we hit our match. Oh my gosh, let's keep the momentum going. If you are at the 50% point in your campaign, celebrate that. Really help to energize folks to want to continue supporting and really push harder towards that finish line. I think that another bonus from this and being very communicative with your staff, your colleagues, your leadership, is that it also shows your commitment to a culture of change, right? A culture of being agile and proactive and pivoting whenever you need to make the most of every campaign that you have. And that also how important data decision making is in your work and your campaigns. And I really think that your leadership will be highly impressed with what you are doing, the effort going into it, and how creative you and your colleagues are being. So share that. Let's also talk about how to harness the momentum when your campaigns are doing really well, because that's the perfect time to lean in and truly maximize your momentum. Double down on your strongest channels so that you can really get the most from them. Boost ad spend or extend those high-performing email sequences. Add urgency tactics like a matching gift, a monthly upgrade option, or even a countdown clock to drive that action, keep things going. And don't forget the importance of social proof. Share success stories, share updates, so anybody who's a latecomer can feel inspired to join in and be part of that winning effort.
All right, so let's talk about, well, we have already talked about the campaign specific adjustments that you can make, but it's all for naught if the proper preparations haven't been made. So operational barriers and executional barriers can derail even the best year-end fundraising plans. So even the best campaign struggles if your systems don't talk to each other. Disconnected systems cause the slow thank yous, the missed opportunities, and the poor decisions because you're trying to pull data together from all these different locations to analyze them. And we all know that manual reporting slows down your ability to pivot, especially when something isn't working. So the good news is that simple fixes like quick dashboards, automation hacks, and tighter integration between your CRM, your email platform, and your donation pages can remove those roadblocks. So by streamlining processes and making a goal of doing that before December 1st, that'll put you in a really good position to be able to focus on your donors. And that's really where we want to put our energy towards and not focusing on the data headaches. So 3 ways that you can streamline right now is to automate the donation syncing through your integrations, automate your thank yous, and make them as personal as you possibly can, and make sure that those have a more story-driven content. And number three, build a dashboard that tracks those key metrics in real time that we've been talking about throughout this. And I know that this can be a little bit difficult because some of us work in so many different platforms, but it's made much easier because all of these things can be managed together through Bonterra's donor management system.
Yes, tech can help, right? Tech. And we would be remiss if we didn't say that AI can help too. AI is quickly it's quickly become a very powerful and efficient tool for fundraisers. It can make campaigns smarter and more efficient. You can use AI to test your subject lines, your call to actions, and copy variations on the fly. You can run those through to polish them up a bit. You can you can work with AI when your click rates start to slip and ask for, advice on what you might do. It can help with your segmentation by flagging which donors are most likely to upgrade, lapse, or respond to certain campaigns. For your donor stewardship, AI-powered tools can draft personalized messages, thank you notes to them, scripts. You can use those things to really improve your engagement. And then you can also use predictive modeling, which, through AI can reforecast your gift size trends, donor churn. It can even look and analyze your campaign ROI, your return on investment, really helping you stay focused instead of trying to catch up. Bonterra has integrated a number of AI tools into some of our solutions. And so if you're interested in learning more about how Bonterra is using AI within our technology, feel free to let us know and reach out. I know that we'll pop a poll up for you to raise your hand on that. And, the thing is that it can also just cut down on some of your time. And so as you're using AI, you can also, track the time that you're saving. And that's another metric that you can report back to your leadership and they can share. Now, I'm sure you all know it's important to have guardrails around your AI. We like to talk about having a human-centered approach to your AI. And just understanding, how and being secure in the way in which you are using AI with your donor data and information. So all of that is very important. Bonterra has been at the forefront in the industry and being very transparent about our AI protocols and the guidelines that we've created. So anyways, those are some thoughts around leveraging AI and tech. Christy, talk to us a little bit more about action plans.
Okay, so here's your action plan. A strong year-end campaign needs more than just good intentions, and I think we've established that here. It needs a really clear plan of action. So first thing that we need to do is decide which metrics matter most, and we're going to set thresholds so that you know when something is slipping. Next, we are going to commit to weekly check-ins to keep performance visible, and if you need to do daily as well, that's fine, but we are going to commit to those check-ins to make sure that we understand when something is slipping so we can make those changes immediately. And then finally, we're going to do the planning ahead of time so that we know what we need to do when it's time to pivot, so we can do that quickly if we see those red flags. So small adjustments in real time can make the difference between falling short and finishing strong with your end of year campaigns.
Yeah, so we have a few questions. Ashley, I'll just go ahead and read them if that's okay. Pose them. So one question from Heather harkens back to testing, A/B testing. Are you testing with your donors directly? Would that cause communication fatigue?
So I think I need a little more context around that.
Yeah. Heather,
Um,
feel free to add a little bit more to that. But what I would say is, you likely have multiple communications going out. You're going to have more than one email that goes out during your campaign. And so as you do that, you will have some different A/B tests as you go. Christy, share a little bit. You have such a rich background and agency experience. Share a little bit about, the cadence of the campaign.
so for end of year, specifically, would that help?
Yeah.
Okay, so for end of year, we pretty much start out our cadence around the 28th of December. And from there, we are emailing almost every day. And that is our email campaign. But every day we give some kind of an update on this is where we are to our goal. So at this point in time, we're using things like we mentioned the thermometers or the gauges where you can see kind of where you are to goal. And the goal with that is to communicate to the audience that, we're working towards this end of year goal. It's really important for our organization and this is where we are. And the people that have donated, we do suppress those people from getting the repeating emails. So if somebody's already given, we're not going to keep sending them emails about the goal. We're going to just reach out to those people who may not have opened it or who have opened it and haven't really taken an action to click through. And it's such a short period of time that we don't see very much fatigue. I'm sure that there is some towards the end of the year because, well, I know there is some towards the end of the year because they're getting hit up by a lot of different organizations. But for your organization specifically, it is such a short period of time. They are your donors. They are engaged if they're opening your emails. It's just a matter of kind of pushing them over the line. So after that, you give them a little bit of a break. You give them a nice thank you at the first of the year, letting them know you hit your goal, and then give them a little bit of a break and go from there.
And just to be specific here, when the example that you just gave, where you start on December 28th, is just for those last couple of days of the year. That's
Yes.
not, some people refer to their year-end campaigns as starting
Starting in
in
Giving Tuesday. Okay.
October, actually,
Yeah.
like when November, Network for Good, one of Bonterra's product lines, that's typically with smaller organizations. And we have a cadence where we encourage them to start in November, beginning to start those stories. And there is a timeline where they're posting on social regularly stories around the campaign theme. And they are sending out emails, right? And they are doing those thank you calls to potential and strong, high potential donors. And they have multiple different ways in which you've got your multi or omni-channel communications going during the course of the year-end campaign. Giving Tuesday is kind of a highlight, and then you've got your last few days of the year. So, there is a question Sydney asked, how many emails do you send in your year-end campaign? Christy, you were talking about just the last couple of days where it's every single day, or it might be in the morning and then at night because you're getting ready to wrap your campaign up. So during the course of the season, do you have some guidelines, Christy? We do at Bonterra. You could probably Google some of our communications, some of our white papers and things that we have that give some advice around that.
Yeah, and it definitely depends on the organization and the size of the list and what they're used to receiving. That's going to drive that cadence and the number of emails that go out. But you do kind of want to weigh out and you have to kind of walk yourself through that donor journey and understand, okay, what communications are they getting? When are they getting it? When are they starting to convert and donate and kind of making some decisions based on that? It isn't like I was saying, just executing and just sending out. You really want to put a lot of thought and planning behind which audience are receiving which communications and when they're sending it. And I don't think that there's any like secret, format for that everybody can use. It is very specific. And I think that, just understanding your donors and what they're going to respond to is the key.
Yeah. So Heather gave some more explanation on her question around testing with donors directly. She says, we don't email more than 1 to 2 times a month, so testing live with donors may not work for us. I've never tested live, only through agencies that specialize in it versus using actual customers or donors.
So I'm guessing you're emailing people that have signed up for a newsletter, perhaps, and that's why they're not donors. So maybe it's not a fundraising email program, and that is something that you can slowly work up into. And I'd start off with, in your communications, including a soft ask. So it's, updating the organization with the content that you're going to send out, but in it say, we are working on building up a program to be able to support these services, whatever it may be, and would love for you to make a donation. And just more of a soft ask within those emails. And then as you start building up that donor file where you're sending emails to donors, then you can kind of jump into not, along with the cultivation, you want to keep the cultivation and the email, the information coming, but you can get more into that fundraising style testing with your donor base. But it does take a little bit to build that up.
Sydney asks, do you think sharing "we hit our match" posts will make donors think that they don't need to donate anymore?
Well, that also is a little bit tricky too. So it's a great celebration, but also what I try to do with those is say that now that we've hit our goal, we've been able to secure additional funds to up that goal. And a lot of times, I would say most of the time, that's still going to continue to get people to give because they've already made that decision whether or not you've hit your goal or not, if they're going to donate. So I don't think that that deters anyone as long as you've got a strategy to keep it moving forward. I think that what does deter people is when you do have that deadline. And so it's important, that's where you up that urgency and make sure that it's very clear that you might have hit your goal, but you got a new goal and we still need to hit it by this time of day because now we're going to be able to do X, Y, and Z more for our organization.
Right. Awesome. Okay. So we've answered those questions. Feel free to type in any additional ones that you have. Christy, let's talk about some Giving Tuesday advice.
Sure.
What do you think are the, like some critical pieces of advice as Giving Tuesday is happening? Any pivots that can happen during that day as you go?
Well, I think overall, last year, what I saw worked really well was like we talked about a little bit earlier, which is kind of setting up that story. And so, we would start out early in October with a save the date, which a lot of organizations are doing for Giving Tuesday now. Some people are even getting in front of it and doing postcards, where it takes you to a QR code to start donating. But we start kind of telling stories at that point and walk people through a journey. And there's no ask involved in those emails. So we're sending out emails ahead of time that talk about testimonials. A lot of them are including videos, which is very heartfelt and kind of pulls on the heartstrings and helps you see really what the money is going towards in the organization and the impact that it's making on people. And so we'll start out with that. 1 week we're talking about foster care. The next week we're talking about mental health services for our veterans. The next week we're talking about specialized care for adults with disabilities. So it's kind of building on stories. And then once you get up to Giving Tuesday, then it's more of a, it's time to act. We really could use your donation to help be able to support all these all of these services that you've just read emails on over the past month. And so pivots that can happen with that are, what are you going to do if your open rate is really low? We know that we need to test our subject lines. So we'll have off to the, in our strategy documents, we'll have different types of subject lines to pull in if in fact they aren't working. what's happening if your click-through rate and your conversion rates are low. So we've got different pivots that we're going to set up with that, whether it's through different messaging, maybe this story doesn't resonate with people, but this other story will. So we just have backup plans for all of the different efforts that we're doing, so they're already there. And that way we can pull directly from them, and we're not scrambling to pull content together.
Great. I know we only have a couple minutes left, so I want to take a minute to talk about two things. One, I want to pitch a webinar that we are hosting next week. Ashley, I don't know if you have a link that you can drop in for folks, but we have a panel of organizations that are going to be talking with us as we share some insights from our Meet the Moment impact report that we have just released. We surveyed a number of organizations, nonprofit organizations, as well as funders about the changes in the funding climate right now with federal funding and just overall. And we have some great insights in this Meet the Moment report. I will be facilitating that session, serving as the moderator as we dive into some real case examples of organizations that have had to pivot a bit to meet the moment right now. So feel free to join us next week for that webinar. And then I also just want to talk with you about the one-on-one fundraising and engagement coaching that Bonterra provides to our clients. So Christy is one of our expert coaches. I lead the coaching program. We have about 20 fundraising experts that are working one-on-one with organizations all around the country, focused on their fundraising strategy, talking with them about what they're doing for the campaign, how they're engaging and leveraging their teams in the best way, what insights are coming out. And what's really cool is that they understand our Bonterra tools and technology, and then they are also working with, we work with hundreds of organizations at any given time. So we are feet on the ground, understanding best practices, what's working, what isn't. And so we can share those with you as you are planning out your strategy. We also offer these coaches as ways that organizations can mentor and have a trusted advisor working with either new or high potential staff. So if you are a chief development officer and you have a team and you're like, I don't have time to mentor, these new folks or onboard these new staff around, some of the fundraising, these coaches can do it too. So think about that. If you're interested, feel free to reach out to us. I'm going to turn things back over to Ashley to wrap it up. But thank you all for your time today and for being part of this just discussion that we've had around how to pivot more. Times are changing. And so hopefully you now have some tools to pivot as needed.
Yes, absolutely. Kimberly, Christy, thank you so much for such a great session. Like I said in the beginning, folks, you were in for a treat and a treat was delivered. There are some things coming in through the chat. And yeah, this was such a great presentation. We know that year end and Giving Tuesday can be a quite stressful time. So we really hope that you got some tips and tricks to leave this afternoon and to take with you so that you can feel just even a little less stressed with the time of year that we know is coming quickly. But folks on the line, thank you. Thank you for spending an hour with us. Thank you for dedicating time to be present with us, listen to us. We know that an hour is a lot of time, and we know that we are very grateful to have spent it with you all. And we definitely hope to see you next week. I dropped the link in the chat to join our Meet the Moment webinar, where Kimberly will do what I usually do and moderate that session and help bring that panel to life. And we hope to see you throughout some of our upcoming year-end sessions that we have planned for you all. And again, thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time and for engaging with us in the chat and Q&A. We hope to see you all very, very soon. Bye, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.